So the teens have heard some of this because it was something I was studying on and looking back on. But if you look through kind of some questions we've been talking about on Sunday mornings, kind of trading teachers in and out, different questions that were asked. And we were talking a little bit this past Sunday about some questions that come out of Job. And, one that I kind of want to look at is one that Job asks in chapter 3, verses 1 through 26. We get one of Job's speeches, and he starts asking this question. And I'm not going to read all of this for lack of time tonight. Job can be a little lengthy. But he asks this question, and you really boil it down to our language. He says, why is it that if I'm serving God, am I suffering? Why are these bad things happening to me because I'm serving God? Why is this happening? As a matter of fact, about 6 different times he asks that question. And he's suffering so badly. He starts asking questions like in verses 3 through 10, why was I even born? The day that I was born, can we just strike that from history and make it that never happened? And of course, the answer to that was absolutely not. That's not happening. You were born. Deal with it. And he comes back and says, well, why wasn't I allowed to die after I had been born? He's in a rough position at this point. Matter of fact, he comes down in verses 21 through 26. It boils down to, why can't I just die now? And you think about Job, a righteous man, but he's suffering. And he's asking God, why am I suffering if I'm serving God? He's getting no support from his friends at this point. They're saying, you can't possibly be righteous because you're suffering. And he knows I am righteous. And the thing is they don't have that lovely hindsight that we have now to know these conversations that have been going on in the background, where the whole reason that he's suffering is because he's righteous. You remember that conversation as the sons of God gather together and Satan comes in among them and says, what have you been doing? I've been going to and fro upon the earth. And it says, well, have you checked out my servant Job? Have you seen him? And he is suffering because God's been bragging on him. And matter of fact, he's so confident in his righteousness, he says, go ahead, hit him. And he just hit him again. And he knows, God knows that this is fine. To Job, he doesn't know any of this backstory right now. All he knows is that a righteous man, he is suffering. And is suffering so badly, he wishes he had never been born. He wishes he just died as soon as he was. And he wants to die now. Interesting is the amount of suffering he's going on there. But, look at this reason, the question, why is it that the righteous suffer? And sometimes, as I've said before just now, sometimes we suffer simply because we are. Not because we've done anything wrong, but because we're doing everything right. And it's something to look at, because you got to wonder if suffering doesn't have some kind of value. Later on in chapter 32, in the first 1 through 37 of there, Elihu brings up this idea. He brings up this question about the says, doesn't suffering actually have value to it? Doesn't it really? I think of the example as I go through this, and I'm kind of looking back through time. Okay, if you've ever been in my garage, it's an absolute mess. There's a path that winds through to get to the house. You open the door, you just kind of wind through. But if you want to see what's clean in my garage, find the toolbox. The toolbox is well organized and clean. Because when I get my tools out, I clean them before I put them back up. It annoys Candy. I walk in the house, I'm at the kitchen sink with the Dawn cleaning all the oil off my wrenches. I'm wiping down my air tools, putting them back in their pouches, put them right back in the place they belong, closing the drawer up. Everything's nice and organized where it needs to be. I like my tools. I buy good tools. I don't buy cheap tools because I want my tools to treat me well. So I buy nice tools, and I keep them very, very clean. I keep them very maintained. I oil my air tools. All right, this is something people don't know you need to do, but you got to do that kind of thing. But I kind of had my heart broken about one of my tools a little while back. Back when I had the red Volkswagen that I traded off last summer, I had to change the brakes on it. I had to get into the rear brakes. And that takes it's either a 10 or a 12 millimeter box wrench that you got to get in there. And there's these 2 nuts that oppose each other that hold this thing together. And I got to get them loose. Problem is, I have this much room to get a box wrench in there. Problem is, box wrenches are about yay big. So I had to do, go over to my dad's house, and I take my shiny, clean, well cared for, well-loved wrench, and I start grinding on it. I got to make it thinner. See, right now, it's my favorite, and I love it. It's a great little tool, and it's not useful to me. It can't do the job I need it to do, so I go in and I grind on it. It gets hot. It's changing colors. My hands are getting warm, I'm not good with a grinder, so it doesn't look pretty either. It's not like it's a great professional grinding job. But in the end, I had to do some damage to my wrench in order to make it useful for what it was there. I know it's kind of a strange metaphor for it, but the idea is that as tools, which is what we are for God, in a lot of cases we are tools for Him. And sometimes in the shape we're in, we're not really useful. We're very valuable, but we're not really useful. And so we might have to suffer sometimes, just as Job would have to do here. We might have to suffer sometimes to become useful for the job that's set ahead of us. We don't always understand it. We don't always know why it's happening to us, but we can look at it and see that sometimes it really does benefit us, that as we suffer, that we're changed for the better when we take it with the right attitude. You think about all the kinds of things that you can do when you're suffering. You can look at it and see the proper priorities maybe that we should be having. The people who go through loss, and they come out of it understanding, I didn't really lose that much. I had a friend, when the tornadoes came back in the late 90s through Blue Ash up there, his business was leveled. And his livelihood, he worked for himself. He owned the company. Now he works for somebody else now. But there he was in the middle of this with his ruined business, and what does he do? Nobody was at work that day. Whew, this is great. And it was a great thing to see where the priorities were, that his people were safe. It didn't matter about the building. It didn't matter about the business. We can help us sometimes to understand that when we start losing things because of suffering, whatever, financial hardships, lose a job, something happens, and suddenly we can't pay the cable bill. Got to shut the cable off, and suddenly our mind starts to become a little freer because we're not clogging it up with that garbage. Think about all the advantages we can get because we have to go through some sort of suffering, something that might prepare us for work that we need to be doing, something that frees us up for that. It helps us be conscious of God's blessings a lot of time because He never takes everything away. It's the superfluous stuff, that surface stuff that gets taken away. And that just strips us down to what we need to be, where we're not only valuable to Him, but that we are also useful. And so when we go through suffering times, don't look at it, and I know it's tough sometimes. Look and go, why me? And it's so hard sometimes, but maybe it's a little more beneficial to us if we can look up and go, okay, what am I being pointed to? What am I being set up for? Because we understand that suffering does have value. In Romans chapter 8 and verse 28, we find that all things work together for good to them that love God, to them who are called according to His purpose. When anything's happening to us, if we are righteous, our suffering, there's a purpose to it. And it's something that God is going to have work out for the good. It's going to hurt right now. It'll feel better later. Everything will feel better later in the end game. So when things are getting a little rough, just remember, it's not so much about why is this happening to me, but what is it that I can do? What am I being pointed towards? What exactly am I being set up for? And then go to it. As whatever the case is. Again, it hurt me to break my wrench. It really did. But now it serves a purpose. I don't have the car anymore, and I still have that wrench. If ever I need to get into a small little spot again, I'm set. I'm ready to go for it. And that's the way we need to look at ourselves sometimes, just as we suffer. What exactly are we being set up for? What are we being put in place to do? And we look at the world around us, we can see there's plenty to be done. And if we're not quite where we need to be for that, accept it, that sometimes we just need to be taught the hard way, and in a way that isn't quite so comfortable, to get out there and do what needs to be done. And certainly we're going to be a better example if we're living our lives right. And so the invitation tonight is that if you haven't let God shape you the way He needs you, maybe through suffering, maybe through prosperity, happens both ways sometimes. If you haven't let God shape you the way that you need to be for Him, we have an awesome opportunity right now with plenty of people here to help, to pray for you, to do whatever needs to be done to help you out. Whether coming to Him for the first time through baptism or through the second time since dinner this evening for falling short, we have the opportunity to fix that, and plenty of people to help. We just got to know about it. It's our job, it's our privilege, it's our joy to help each other out. Wouldn't you let us help you while we stand and sing?